You don't have to fly far, just turn off the highway in Utah and drive to the tiny town of Ivins. The town sinks into a low basin, surrounded on all sides by massive, jagged mountains. Not a single tree, only red rock of an unusual shade. Beautiful, until you start scrolling through the photos. There's something strange about them. Beyond the ridges, it's as if there's nothing, just desert stretching into infinity. Nowhere to hide from the sun. The backyard runs up against a red canyon. Instead of trees, prickly cacti. A bare, scorched landscape with its own particular aesthetic. About 10,000 people live in Ivins. They come here for the quiet, especially those willing to pay $5 million for a house. That kind of money means one thing: the person wants to be left alone. On August 30th, 2023, a 12-year-old boy climbs out of the window of a $5.3 million mansion. Shorts, socks, a huge man's shirt that swallows him whole. No shoes. Walking unsteadily like a baby giraffe, you can tell he's in pain. His ankles are tightly wrapped in duct tape over plastic wrap. Ahead lies a long path across scorching ground without a shred of shade. It's 104 degrees outside, the asphalt heated to 140. Like stepping with a bare foot onto a red-hot frying pan. That's exactly what this child has to do right now. Cross this hell in nothing but socks and reach the neighbors. There are no other options. Only 3 houses on the block are occupied. The boy has 2 chances. The sun is baking the tape into his wounds. Every step leaves burns and blisters. He quietly approaches the first house, rings the doorbell and waits. He doesn't pound, just stands motionless for 40 seconds. If those he ran from come back early, this ends badly. No one opens. He moves on to the third house. He hears the answering machine and freezes. There's nowhere left to run. Going back means signing his own death sentence. His shoulders drop and he turns away from the last door, and suddenly, a click. The door opens. An elderly man stands in the doorway. The boy stops and softly asks, "Excuse me, could you do me a favor?" He begs to be taken to the police station. The neighbor notices the tape on his wrists and invites him inside. From this moment on, the full horror of what was happening behind the walls of the $5 million mansion comes to light. 2 bound children were being held in a fortified room. Their wounds had been sprinkled with cayenne pepper. They were starved for weeks, forced to sleep on the ground and walk barefoot across the scorching desert. If the boy hadn't escaped, the children wouldn't have survived. These tortured captives were the biological children of Ruby Franke, a well-known YouTuber who for years had filmed her supposedly perfect family. This is the story of the channel 8 Passengers. Only the adult children, Sherry and Chad, can be named. The younger ones, for their safety, will not be mentioned. Sherry recently published a book, The House of My Mother. It's piercing and accurate, a whole new look at the fake world of family vlogs. When you hear the whole story to the end, you'll understand why she became a source of inspiration for so many people. The book is written from the heart, quite literally. But first, a warning. There's a lot of heavy material: abuse of children, severe food restrictions, starvation, camps, wilderness therapy. Not everyone is comfortable hearing this, and that's okay. And one more thing, the Franke family is LDS. But this isn't a conversation about religion. The actions of one person cannot be projected onto an entire denomination. This isn't an attack on the Mormon faith or on the church. It's just that Ruby Franke was an active participant there, and at times she took religious ideas and twisted them to fit her own purposes, to justify cruelty toward her own children. The format is 3 parts. Interest in this story flared up again after a new documentary. There were many requests. At first it seemed one episode would be enough. The topic has been chewed over online for years. But the deeper you dive, the more obvious it becomes. There are too many layers, too many conclusions from people whose lives this story is genuinely changing. So 3 parts, and the first one is about Ruby Franke's YouTube career. The warning signs viewers noticed from the very beginning. The evidence she herself uploaded into the public domain, and how being publicly canceled didn't cool her down. Ruby's family therapist, who over time turned into a genuine cult leader, and we'll break down the lives she deliberately destroyed under the cover of a psychotherapist's license. She had a signature move: wedge herself into someone else's marriage, stand between the spouses, push them toward divorce, a class-wide dislike of men. And there are also the rumors of a romance between Ruby and Jodi. The third part is straight-up cult territory. Ruby's journals are enormous, day by day, where she records in plain text how she torments her own children, and separately, the figure of Kevin, the husband and father of 6. The main question: where was he this whole time, and why was he never charged with a crime? But let's get back to the heart of it. There's a room there called the Rabbit Stick Room, something between a utility room and an abandoned office. Dark blue carpeting, an old couch, white fans in the corners, cold fluorescent light. Everything feels faded and hopeless. And every Friday the door opens and a group of teenagers walks in. Rabbit stick, literally a rabbit stick, almost childish sounding. They don't know each other. Not friends, not classmates, just random kids. And each one gets the same outfit. Put it on and forget about your former life. It's over. And the speech goes something like this: the world has changed. The easy days are gone. Social media, video games, forget them. Now it all comes down to survival. You have to find food. You have to not die. Figure it out yourself. And each one gets one backpack, so they can survive in the Arizona wilderness. And you carry it on your back. Lose it. Your fault. No one will give you a new one. Next comes finding ways to survive. 3 days of hunger, because in the wild you have to earn your food. No toilet paper, no shower, no proper bed. And like this for 5 to 6 weeks. Practically every second you're convinced you won't make it. A wilderness therapy program for teenagers. Children are dumped into the desert to survive because they don't listen at home. And inside, they're called young walkers. Above them are shadows, the counselors. You can't approach them about anything. You have to manage on your own. Some of the children ended up there against their will. If the staff decides a teenager won't come voluntarily, they sign a paper and a special team takes the child at night, straight out of bed. They told me we were going to Disneyland. And in the end, I'm sitting in the desert eating a lizard because I'm starving. The same logic as Asian correctional camps, just repackaged into an American version with desert and spirituality, and there are tons of such institutions in the U.S. Anasazi itself writes about its program like this: teenagers live in a primitive way and learn the skills of the ancients. They learn to prepare their own food, build shelters. They walk up to 10 miles a day, and supplies are replenished once a week. They accept ages 12 to 17 with even minor behavioral difficulties. The list is impressive: depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, internet addiction, learning difficulties, family conflicts, immaturity, lack of motivation. You won't find a single person who doesn't have at least one or half of these items. Essentially, a cynical bet on desperate parents. Don't know what to do with your child? Dump them in the desert. Yes, exactly like that. After all, teenagers usually have rough patches precisely between the ages of 12 and 17, and as a rule, psychologists recommend you just have to live through it. But here it's a disguised way to offload responsibility for a tidy sum. One of the former students tells a horrifying story. They forced him to suddenly quit alcohol. Withdrawal made him feel so awful that thoughts of taking his own life appeared. He asked the therapist for more time. The program gave 15 minutes a week. The answer: your therapy is the hikes. Go and heal yourself. He also remembers that for 2 days straight, the only water he had access to was from a cattle trough mixed with livestock feces. He couldn't sleep on the rocks. Coyotes howled nearby. All night, in tears, he begged the staff to take him out. One of the reviews begins with the words, quote, 7, and the program is aggressive, traumatic. Parents are sold it as a way to straighten out a troubled teen with a religious undertone, with an emphasis on God. In reality, it has nothing in common with the marketing materials, a convenient cover for sadists without qualifications. There's nothing healing about forcing a child to hate themselves. A journalist visited the camp and watched a 16-year-old kid rush to eat a live lizard right in front of him, all because the weekly ration of about 2,000 calories was handed out all at once. And for teenagers walking 5 to 10 miles a day across rough terrain, that's catastrophically little. If you ate it too early or it got stolen, You survive on your own. Wild plants, lizards. The camp became a hot topic when Ruby Franke sent her 14-year-old son, Chad, there. Despite hundreds of reviews from former students calling it hell and admitting to thoughts of ending their lives, Ruby read all of this and calmly packed the boy off. And 2 months later, Chad came back, having gained weight, and announced on camera that he liked it. What must the conditions at home be like if a grueling camp turned out to be better? This story became the beginning of the end. And Ruby was the kind of person for whom it wasn't important to be good. It was important to appear good. And in her world, parenting was the highest calling. But she needed more. Not approval from her family, but the admiration of millions of strangers. And so the YouTube channel 8 Passengers was born. In the very first video, Ruby, pregnant with her 6th child, declares with a sincere smile her goal to be a ray of sunshine and to show a happy family. The illusion began to crack because of a harmless prank. At 2 in the morning, Chad woke his 7-year-old brother, faking a trip to Disneyland. The little boy believed it, happily packed his suitcase, and burst into tears when it was all revealed. This very prank set off a chain of punishments that led to catastrophe. For 7 months, his room was taken away. He slept on a beanbag chair in the living room. Ruby smiles smugly as Chad laughingly retells the story, and she cuts him off sharply. "Since you find it funny, I should have kept you without a room even longer," she clarifies. No bedroom at all, and adds that Chad and his sister have been deprived of their phones forever. The teenagers next to her look as if they're being held in front of the camera by force, the most painful moment in the background. Chad quietly drops, quote 10, and his sister echoes, ___, quote _11, ___. And Ruby, not noticing their pain, quickly switches gears. The summer goal: become the best athlete. So much for the ray of sunshine. Saying something like that on camera is a truly vulnerable step. No one forced Ruby to include this segment in the video, but of course she leaps over Chad's feelings and delivers her favorite thesis. As a parent, I understand that sometimes you have to take from your children what is dear to them, and it hurts me to deprive a child of a phone, an iPad, take away their bedroom. I feel just as bad as they do. Here, Chad cleverly catches her. If you really feel that bad, why aren't you planning to give the phones back, and it doesn't show on your face? And what does Ruby do? She makes excuses, as usual. In this 18-minute vlog, 3 out of 6 children directly tell their mother, "We're sad, we're struggling, we have no friends." Like school. A teacher pulls out of you the most painful confession, thanks you for your openness, and then in the same tone sends you to burn in hell. And you sit there thinking, why did I even open my mouth? And the wildest part, Ruby sees nothing wrong with this. So much so that she's ready to upload it online. The edit is built around the conversation about the bed. The teenager has been without his room for 7 months, and Ruby publishes the video. Comments come pouring in. Everything starts to fall apart. They say the path to hell is gradual, but here it feels like the elevator cable snapped. The channel brings in $1,600 a day. From ads alone, almost $600,000 a year. Daily views drop by more than half. Sponsors pull out. Clorox, Norwex. Who wants their brand associated with a mother inventing elaborate punishments for her own children? And the business is collapsing, and Ruby and Kevin make the most idiotic move. Rumor has it they send letters threatening lawsuits to whistleblower channels. These letters work the exact opposite way. They immediately make people want to dig deeper. What are you so afraid of? What was said? But Ruby's wildest reaction is its own song entirely. She writes a huge Instagram post about BLM and George Floyd's death, without a hint of apology, through George Floyd. To summarize briefly, my heart aches because of Floyd's death, because I'm being accused of violence when I was driven only by love. And so, no matter how much you'd want Ruby to feel the full force of the internet cancellation, it hits the whole family. The oldest daughter, Sherry, recalls that the metrics were steadily falling. Any activity under the videos was only negative. And before, the haters would pick at small things like, in Ruby's words, quote, 14. The channel was perceived as a positive family vlog, and now it was as if the gates of hell had opened. And Chad would later say, "We were essentially canceled. We lost about 90% of our income." The comments paint a picture. People used to like Ruby, but it was becoming more and more obvious that she was literally obsessed with the channel. She gave off the energy of a narcissist mother. She singled out some children, controlled food portions, dictated everything. From the outside, everything is perfect, but inside there's an invisible, dense unhappiness. Her behavior resembles the queen type from the profile of narcissistic personality disorder. She vitally needs compliments, that she's a great mother, a great wife, but she's fake through and through. And Ruby doesn't engage in self-reflection at all. She's convinced the rest of the world is wrong. It's cancel culture trying to destroy her. She didn't back down. And in this mood, she starts giving interviews and announcing that Chad has his own room again. I posted videos where he gives a tour of the bedroom. Look how happy he is. A crowd gathers under that old video. No one knew at the time that he had gotten the room literally just then. And viewers notice a detail. His room has no door, taken off the hinges, zero privacy, a bucket of gasoline on an already burning fire. Ruby keeps going. When all of this, predictably, explodes in her face, Ruby just stares stupidly at the computer and deletes comments. Negative? Negative. Kevin would later admit, Ruby started the channel for the money, and because she vitally needed to be praised as a wonderful mother. If she got something into her head, neither heaven nor earth could stop her. She was going to make her vlog louder and more successful. All of Ruby's siblings also have their own family YouTube channels. Before marrying Kevin, she was Ruby Griffiths, the oldest of 5 children. Brother Beau, with his wife Emily, has his own channel, Just Keeps Going. Sister Bonnie, married, 4 children, every minute of life on camera. Julie, 5 children, also her own YouTube. And the youngest, Ellie, with 4 children, one of the most successful among the Griffiths. At their peak, quote, 17 was a leader among the channels. Following were Ellie and Jared. The parents have a channel called quote underscore 18, quote, family blogging is practically a family profession for them. And now the main question, how many subscribers did Ruby herself have? Her sister had a channel with nearly 2 million subscribers. A birth video after IVF went viral. Ruby lagged at first, until she uploaded a viral clip, a baby climbing out of a crib. And from that moment, they took off. The camera now worked around the clock. Ruby plastered on a fake smile and dragged her husband into the frame. If Kevin got lost, she'd snap, "I'll cut this out, help me out here." She wasn't interested in real life, but in a polished production. And at first, it all looked sweet. The kids have fun, money trickles in. The minivan with the quote underscore 20 sticker is recognized on the road. Comments praise it. But everything changed with the first check. The dollars rewired his consciousness. He wanted more and immediately registered a company. From that day on, the children became employees. Every outing was a work shift. Kevin yelled at them if they behaved unnaturally. And when the children started complaining about being tired, Ruby called it something chilling. Ruby demanded that Kevin play the role of the perfect patriarch, even though he himself admitted to being a nerd. He frankly admits he exploited the children for money. The income grew from $2,000 to $100,000 a month, and he felt no guilt. Covering his greed with religion, claiming he was bringing good to the world, that God was blessing them. The house turned into a sterile set with bright fluorescent lighting. Life was entirely subordinated to YouTube. When the channel crossed 1 million, Ruby tearfully thanked the audience, but viewers were already noticing something off. She became fake, baby-talking in a put-on voice. To many, it seemed she was on the verge of a breakdown. At the same time, Ruby developed a frightening inclination toward survivalism, and in archival materials, she proudly demonstrates her stockpiles of freeze-dried food and urges viewers to prepare for an emergency. Ruby was preparing for the end of the world. Canned goods, apocalypse scenario, everything on the checklist. But for her own personal end of the world, it turned out she was completely unprepared. Her online career started burning right before everyone's eyes, literally within a couple of months. Viewers dug into the archives of her old vlogs. One after another, clips surfaced. Here's Ruby standing in line at Chick-fil-A and speaking straight into the camera. She shows the back of the line. Reactions were harsh. One person wrote, quote, _25, quote, others picked up, quote, _26, quote. There was another clip, long since deleted, in the words of commenters, quote, _27, quote. Kevin returned from a business trip to Japan and with relief declared, quote, 28, quote, Japanese cuisine is full of hot dishes. One commenter astutely noted, quote, 29, quote. And all of this was accompanied by a growing wave. People competed to dig up something new. They put down timestamps, made lists. Kevin called what was happening a barrage of hate, inflated by the algorithm. Ruby deleted the video. According to his version, she just wasn't ready for such a flood of concentrated hatred. Although it's hard to call it hatred. It was more like sincere concern for the child and outrage at the parents' behavior. Ruby was crushed. Before this, she had been America's mom. And when people suddenly started looking at her as a monster abusing her children, it haunted her. And the family itself saw it all differently. Innocent religious people under attack from cancel culture. And cancel culture kept escalating. New scandalous vlogs, more clips from the archives, commentary breakdowns, complaints to Child Protective Services, lots of complaints. But it was still a long way to a real investigation. Kevin recounted that Ruby, in private conversations, admitted that she felt like an instrument in God's hands, destined for something bigger. And the comments, meanwhile, kept piling up. No one loves America's mom anymore. People got to her marriage, too. A commenter wrote, quote, 30. Another recalled a scene. Ruby is making quesadillas, Kevin in the background chewing chips, cold, indifferent, funny and sad, but more sad. And Kevin himself explained to Insider that the bed story was a moment of vulnerability and part of the story, and of his triumph over the difficulties of recent years, a rather strange way to romanticize such a situation. And here in the frame appears the book, quote, _31, with its layer of religious fanatics, for whom every word in it is literally prophecy. In short, the book is about the end of the world and how to prepare for it. First, biological warfare, a catastrophic epidemic created as a weapon, will take billions of lives. The U.S. will become contaminated. You can't drink the water if you don't want to grow a fifth arm. The government, of course, stays silent. The 2020s arrive. The book's fans start losing their composure. COVID. Here's your plague, lockdowns and economic upheaval. Here's your collapse, already 2 out of 2. And the third point, a giant earthquake that will destroy the West Coast. A small note. The book is, even among Mormons, considered controversial. The church hasn't officially condemned it, so readers can perceive it as part of the teachings. Although in fact it's an extremely radical story. Rumor has it, it was beloved by various cult leaders and convicted killers. In Salt Lake City, the headquarters of the Mormon Church, an earthquake of magnitude 5.7 strikes, plus COVID. Kevin describes it this way: people are dying, the earth is shaking, protests everywhere, a feeling that the world really is ending. And he admits this caused in him something like exhilaration, as if the second coming were approaching. Everyone else was supposed to burn, and we are on the right side. But with enough serious mental gymnastics, you can get to that point. And here, Apocalypse fans throw in one more item, which isn't in the book at all. An electromagnetic pulse knocked out all electrical power. For Ruby, everything happening felt exactly like this, as if the internet were waging a full-scale attack against her, and her whole life was crumbling in a couple of months. Viewers, meanwhile, methodically reviewed old vlogs, downloaded them, put down timestamps, and wrote in. Ruby herself would later say, because of her, about 1,000 reports came in. And another scene. In 20 years, it'll sound like a joke. Kevin is at the dinner table with all 6 children. Ruby pulls out a big garbage bag, folders and notebooks inside. Chad lunges for the bag. That's my homework. Ruby calmly waits for silence and announces, "Want it back? Pay cash so you learn the value of your things." Or, alternatively, "Dad, the floor is yours." She turns the camera on Kevin. He thinks for a moment, says, "You can." Ruby goes even further. The children are required to earn back every one of their belongings. Didn't finish by the end of the day, the item flies into the trash. What's more, she charged them money for the right to do their homework. No money, you don't do the homework, you get a milking and pay again. A vicious circle on which she made content and made money. And in the quote 35 videos, 7-year-old children got up at 6 a.m., read scripture, played instruments, cleaned up after all 8 of them, made lunch, and only then went to school. Commenters reasonably asked, what does Ruby herself do all day, if by 8 a.m. the children have already done everything? Only dinner was left on her. In another video, a 4-year-old daughter cheerfully comes down the stairs, and Ruby aggressively shoves the camera in her face. Right then, on camera, she calls the nanny to leave the girl home as punishment for a harmless question. The little one clings to her mother's leg in tears, and Ruby is unyielding. "I'm not taking an ungrateful girl. Hug me and prove that you value me." Pure emotional terror. And commenters justly noted that she just got hooked on power and enjoyed yanking the children in any direction. The youngest daughter accidentally spilled nail polish on a rug and hid from her mother for half an hour. And Ruby didn't try to calm the child down, she filmed the search on camera. Having found her daughter under the bed, she dragged her out by the leg and sent her to bed while the whole family ate cookies. Later, the little girl explained on camera in an adult way. At first it was fun, then it became scary and shameful. Hearing this from a small child without normal parental protection was simply painful. They scrubbed the house, baseboards, windows, corners, 6 children, a full-on cleaning crew. Any little thing turned into a demonstrative dressing down and push-ups as punishment. With all this strictness, Ruby completely ignored what was important to the children. While 11-year-old Chad was preparing for a soccer match, she was in the kitchen admiring herself on camera, his game mentioned only in passing. For him, it wasn't just a game, it was a chance to make a name for himself. And here Ruby turns to him with the camera. "Is Dad taking you to the match?" "Yeah. I think I'm not going to go. You don't mind?" And Chad freezes. You can see it hurts. He shrugs and quietly drops, "It's fine. You never come anyway." And here Ruby flares up. "Don't say that. Viewers will think I never come to your games." "Well, that's how it is. I go to your events. Last season you showed up to only 2 games. You're throwing me under the bus on camera, making me look bad." Freeze frame. Chad behind the kitchen island, arms crossed, eyes vacant, holding on with his last strength not to cry. And Ruby keeps filming, camera right on him, all the subscribers see it. And at this moment, she turns to the younger one and starts goofing around, literally right next to him. But no reaction to Chad, no attempt to talk, to comfort, to apologize. And the main question, what is she so busy with anyway? This isn't the case where a mother says, quote 45, no, she's just shooting a video. She's tosses out, "Love you, sorry," and that's it. Comments under the videos are exploding. Quote 47 __. She complains that she's too busy, no time to support her own children. But it's her who dumps on Sherry and Chad, the 2 oldest, the care of the 4 younger ones. They themselves are still children, and along the way, without batting an eye, she announces in the vlog that the 2 youngest haven't bathed for a week, with the camera in her own hands. And people naturally dig all this up and assemble it into one picture. Viewers started comparing videos. A child at the dentist. The doctor throws up his hands. A bunch of cavities. You need to watch their diet and brushing. At the next visit, already 9 cavities. Even more. Kids are kids. They hide candy. You find melted chocolates in the mattress. But a parent is required to at least try. By the feel of it, Ruby wasn't interested at all in helping her children. It's one thing to try and the child still does it their own way. But here it's something else. Constant irritation. The youngest daughter flunked math, mentioned in the vlog more than once. Not a hint that Ruby would sit down with her to do homework or find a tutor. Only repeated mentions of ___, quote _48, ___. For this daughter's birthday, she gets a book from Book Genius Maze. She'd been asking for it for ages. Ruby films every second of her happiness and then turns the camera on herself with a crooked smirk. ___, quote _49, ___. The father, an instructor at the local college, lingers in the background, looking stunned. Hold on, he didn't even know his daughter was failing math? How? He teaches there. Honors and culture? What? Okay, Ruby continues. She waited until her daughter unwrapped the gift, let her live through the moment of joy when she says, "I want to run upstairs and read right now." And Ruby takes the books away. It seems logical to say it differently. Let's first take care of math and then we'll open the books. Why this agonizing circus? In another video, already scrubbed, it doesn't exist. One of the children comes up to Ruby in a fitting room and says there's a hole in the wall and something touched him. Maybe an insect, maybe a mouse, maybe nothing. And Ruby completely ignores him, so as not to interrupt the filming. And here it is, this whole picture. Excessively strict, strange, punitive, inattentive, and on the verge of a dystopia. And Ruby announces to Chad, "No texting at the table." Takes away his phone. And Chad, by the way, has a flip phone. They specifically gave him a basic button phone. And Kevin takes it and starts reading his son's text exchange with a girl out loud, not just to the family but to the whole block. And I'm almost certain all of Chad's friends are watching this too. If these were jokes among peers, okay, internet humor, everyone's having fun. But this is a parent-child dynamic. The kid didn't consent to this. He'd be ashamed to take a personal journal and read it out in public. That's exactly what happened. And the kicker? They tear into their son over his texts, and they're filming. And humiliating. And hypocritical parents are the worst kind. And Ruby uploads to the internet Chad's entire life from wake up to bedtime, 5 days a week. His things, his routine, his thoughts, his text messages, everything online. Technology is built into Ruby's life, and therefore into Chad's life. But for him, a flip phone. And Ruby herself jokes in the vlog, ___, quote _55, ___. And the kid's social media is under strict control or banned entirely. And Ruby uploads every sneeze of family life. It got to the point that she forces Chad to smile for thumbnails, even though it doesn't come naturally. ___, quote _56, ___, Ruby, doesn't care, she needs the shot. In another video, she sits next to Chad, reading from her phone. And, by all appearances, a sponsor integration about the connection between parents and teens. Next question. More important than school and grades. She turns to Chad, and he looks as if he'd be overjoyed to be on Mars right now. He shrugs. He already knows whatever his mother says. It'll hurt. Ruby explodes. Chad, are you ready to help me or not? You're being kind of distant. Ruby. Well, maybe this is the moment for self-reflection? Maybe it's time to ask yourself the simplest question, why? And one of the sons later admitted, he deliberately said not the words Ruby asked him to say on camera, deliberately set his mother off, and he himself didn't understand why, just out of spite. Apparently, that was the only way to somehow get back at her for the fact that the whole family's life had long since turned into content. In psychology, there's a concept where this aggression builds up in a child. Yeah, and when any word from the parent triggers irritation, tension, fury, it's when parents don't hear us, when they completely suppress us, the children, then any phrase from this person, the parent, is simply a trigger. And one of the hardest episodes, Chad's friend's father tragically took his own life. And for a small town, this was a shock. And Chad was devastated. What would any normal mother do? Set aside the camera, help her son process the guilt, the confusion, the pain. But no, Ruby kept filming the children who had just heard the news, herself in tears in front of the lens. Chad, silently lying on the bed with an empty gaze. Not once did she comfort him, but she did pronounce on camera, In situations like this, if you weren't kind to a person, you can feel enormous regret. It's unclear what she's driving at, as if he hadn't treated his friend's father well. The teenager at that moment was, most likely, just tormented by the normal question, could I have noticed something, said something, done something? But the mother, instead of support, dropped a feeling of guilt on him right on camera. Humiliation gradually became the main theme of the vlog. Ruby stands in the bathroom with the camera and informs subscribers that her daughter has been asking all summer for permission to shave her legs and underarms, and the girl looks at her with the face of someone who has just been betrayed in public and says, "I didn't say I wanted to shave." Meanwhile, in those same vlogs, it had been mentioned more than once that this particular daughter was being bullied at school. If she was being teased, including for body hair, that's direct fuel for bullying. When you're being bullied for something about your appearance, the only defense is to pretend it doesn't bother you, and as soon as the bullies see that you're upset, it gets much worse. Easy to do. The girl feels this and repeats on camera, "No, I don't want to." But Ruby adds, "I think you need to shave your underarms even more than your legs. Come on, show me," and reaches under her t-shirt to check on camera. And Ruby proudly tells subscribers every time one of the children wet the bed and explains to me, "This child is going to sleep on the floor in the bathroom. Mom, I wet myself. Go to the bathroom." Then there are videos with lurid titles, "Wet myself at school," "Buying a bra with brothers," "First time shaving." Sherry later said, if you type her name into search, the first thing Google suggests is periods. Because her mother recorded a vlog about her daughter's first menstruation, the girl in the recording clearly feels awkward, but for Ruby, it's just another plot line. And the kids are sick, they're vomiting, and the mom on camera discusses which camera to use. Meanwhile, Ruby keeps repeating, ___, quote _69 ___. It sounds like nonsense. Absolutely everything makes it to camera, including the first physiological changes in the child's body. But discipline, for some reason, is considered a private zone. One comment hit the mark. So your daughter buying her first bra you film, but punishment is personal? At some point on social media, a trend appeared. Adults would take a child's favorite toy and start shaving it to capture the reaction. Same genre, same level. Her youngest daughter is going through the scissor phase. In preschool, they teach cutting paper with safe, dull scissors, training motor skills. It's a typical stage. The girl takes the scissors and cuts things that shouldn't have been cut. An adequate mother would have grabbed her head. Good thing the scissors are safe. No more leaving them unattended. Ruby chooses something else, grabs the camera, shoves it in the 4-year-old girl's face, takes her favorite plush toy by the neck and says, "If I find one more thing cut up in the house, I'll take the scissors and cut off its head, and Grandma will be so upset." For a small child, a soft toy isn't a rag, it's a close friend, it's a source of safety. And the mother on whom you 100% depend has just promised to behead it. The girl's face on the recording is the face of a person being shown footage of hostages, because she is a hostage. In a deleted vlog from 2016, the family is getting ready to leave. Ruby approaches one of the younger daughters and asks what she packed in her bag. The girl starts to cry quietly, clearly afraid she won't be allowed to take her favorite toy. And in the comments, people write similar stories. ___, quote _72, note. How Ruby looks surprised, as if she's hearing for the first time that this particular toy is her daughter's favorite. Is she really not aware which plush animal her child can't fall asleep without? Are you even acquainted with your own children? In another video, the girl confesses to her mother that she spilled something in her backpack, and the backpack is ruined. Already on its own, this scene says a lot. The child clutches the backpack in her hands and looks as if she's about to be executed, sniffling, the typical tics of a person who is afraid. And while the girl is on the brink of hysterics, Ruby pronounces into the camera, ___, quote _73 and the child understands everything. The camera is the only thing holding the mother back from exploding. Then the little one starts crying, and Ruby switches on her signature affected sympathetic tone. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 74, underscore, underscore. Imagine what it's like to live in fear because of an ordinary backpack. And also, her nervous tics are the saddest thing I've seen. But one of the most devastating fragments is Ruby in the car in a bright yellow hat, filming herself. This might be more frightening than even the bed story. By this time, other scandalous pieces had already started seeping into the public sphere. Breakdowns were being made of them, but most viewers who hadn't followed the channel didn't notice. If you didn't live inside this story, you don't understand the scale. In the frame is Ruby, in a bright yellow hat, phone in hand, reading aloud a text message from a teacher. The girl didn't take her lunch. Could the mother bring her food? And Ruby explains into the camera, "These things happen. The teacher is uncomfortable watching a hungry child. Her discomfort could be solved with a container, but packing a lunch is my daughter's responsibility. Once she said she packed everything, let her receive the only consequence. Go hungry." And she adds with enthusiasm, "I hope no one at school will share with her. I want my daughter to come home and say, 'That was agonizing. I'll always pack a lunch now.'" The child she's talking about is 5 years old. 5. Do you know a single 5-year-old who packs their own lunch? And in high school, many can't manage without help. And here's what knocks the ground out from under you. The child will go the whole day hungry, and no one will help her. This scene became one of the main reasons for outrage, on par with the story about Chad, who didn't even have a bed. And in the overall picture, one thing comes through. Food and a place to sleep stop being something the child gets simply because they're a child. Ashley Trim, the co-author, also has a big question. Kids need beds, no exceptions. Kevin and Ruby made excuses, taken out of context. The drive to school is 45 minutes. The school day was over. The problem is, in the video itself, there's not a word about that. And in the comments, people wrote, "This is what she voluntarily uploads," in a calm voice. If she doesn't find a friend at school who'll share food, she just won't eat today. The only consequence. Didn't take money or a lunch. Her fault. There'll be a tasty snack at home. Wait until the end of classes. Smiles. Next time be more attentive. And waves her hand, smiles at the camera. It seems he almost cried there. Right after that, another seemingly innocent video. Ruby in the kitchen on Sundays after service. They're finishing the leftovers, and this is the best moment of the week. One of the children chimes in, "On this day, Mom doesn't get angry that they're eating something." The happiest moment. Observers in the comments noted right away, the children are relaxed because they're not at war for survival. Inside their own house. Food in the Franke vlogs is the main pain point. When Ruby shows dinner, there's little food. Shows the grocery haul, little food. The sense that the children simply don't have free access to the fridge is a complaint subscribers had been accumulating long before the scandal. What do we have today? No vegetables, no fruit, no meat, cheap processed foods and snacks. And Ruby herself, meanwhile, whined about how expensive groceries are. Many wrote directly, fresh vegetables would come out cheaper. Why aren't there any? It's as if she doesn't feed the children at all. Well, tomatoes in spaghetti sauce, otherwise carbs all day. Stuffing the kids with junk, empty carbs to fill the stomach, little meat, no fruit. Stop whining about the budget. You make money off your own children. No vegetables, just snacks. Frozen taquitos, bread rolls, cookies, that's it. Ruby herself lets it slip. "It really pains me to increase the food budget, but I'll have to. I don't like being hungry." Telling. For herself, she's already figured out being hungry is bad. But the thought of increasing spending for the children causes almost physical pain. And this isn't a story about, "I can't afford it." The family has money plenty for the evening. It's just sad. 2 trays of chips, cheese, and pork leftovers. And where are any vegetables at all? Meanwhile, she's stuffing a whole burrito in her mouth. Ruby at every opportunity says cooking is her passion. From the picture, you wouldn't say so. And on TikTok, there's a compilation with the children, where you can clearly hear her voice. "I'm telling you for the last time, otherwise you'll lose the right to eat dinner." In another fragment, the children are literally starving. "I'm scared to say this, but I told them until you do the chores, you won't even have breakfast. A long hunger, stop crying or there'll be no breakfast. In another piece, they complain. I buy expensive cereal. I say it's enough for a week, and they sweep it away in an hour. No more cereal. You'll eat oatmeal until you learn to keep yourselves within limits. The self-assurance with this kind of logic is its own horror. If kids in an hour eat what was meant for a week, the problem isn't with the children, it's with the math of the portions. There's also a recording with the oldest daughter, Sherry, the same one who would later write a New York Times bestseller. She explains on camera, quote, 83, From just this schedule alone, you feel sick. Arbitrary caloric days, not a single number of which covers the actual needs of a growing teenager. It's just unhealthy. And viewers increasingly ask, how is it possible she posted for years and no one intervened? It's hard for me to understand what she considers normal for dinner. One of the kids complained that it was chicken noodle soup again, and from the frame you could see exactly the same soup was there yesterday. A modest little bowl and that's it. No side dish, nothing next to it. If you put it all together, the picture becomes extremely troubling. On one side, a smiling mom blogger who breathlessly tells how she adores Sunday meals from leftovers. The other side, the same woman with a calm voice explaining to a child over the phone that today she just won't eat. And the same one who publicly hopes that her 5-year-old daughter will spend the day hungry. The same one who came up with a schedule of 1,500, 1,700, and 1,900 calories by days, as if it were a dosing schedule rather than the nutrition of living, growing children. Her desire to control everything connected to food, the budget, the menu, the portion. Ruby wants to be seen as the perfect mother. Among the kitchen scenes, the fact that the children are underfed is present in every video. In Korea, there's a song about jjajangmyeon, black bean noodles. The mother has no money, the child eats this noodle, and the mother says she doesn't like it. Later it turns out she was pulling leftovers from the trash can and eating them with rice. A bitter, honest story about poverty and a mother's sacrifice. The problem with Ruby is that her story isn't this one at all. There's money, there are cameras, there's an audience. Rice from the freeze-dried rations. The strategic stockpile gathered dust on the shelves, while her own children went hungry. All these pieces had long been floating around the internet, but they were really dug up only after the bed story. Then old videos were pulled from the far corners of YouTube and started getting passed around again, frame by frame. Many viewers were outraged just as much as by the bed story itself by Ruby's overall behavioral pattern. Similar greed, Ruby simply didn't provide the children with what was necessary, while the family's financial means were more than sufficient. And in the vlogs, there are moments where she literally expects from the children a thank you note for the most ordinary things, demands delight, almost tears. For what? For new socks, not designer ones, just because all the old ones had long had holes. Things they urgently needed right now. Bed sheets, ordinary sheets, gift wrap. The children in this family were suspiciously thrilled about pillows. One viewer wrote that this seemed very strange to her. Such excitement over a pillow. Another, more harshly, sheets and pillows the parents are obliged to give the child just like that, not give as birthday gifts. And the same with socks. Another comment, giving a child a bed they need under the guise of a holiday present. A bed isn't a gift. The children didn't really have clothes either, 5 outfits each, but the problem was made worse. Ruby bought bright, memorable, distinctive items, not a simple white t-shirt no one would notice, and the children appeared at school in the same outfit 3 to 4 times a week. You get bullied for that. One comment, Ruby is constantly busy with laundry because the children have only 4 outfits each. And from endless rotations, the clothes turn to rags right on their bodies. Another viewer agrees. Ruby herself in one episode complains that the kids wear through clothes fast, and in the same video proudly declares that they only need a few outfits anyway. Where's the logic? A separate story. The sick child. When someone caught a virus, Ruby isolated them so the others wouldn't get infected. And the principle itself is reasonable. The question is, how exactly? A 5-year-old is lying with a fever. Ruby takes a blanket, pillows, a throw, and lays the child on the floor, but not in the room, in a small cramped compartment behind the bathroom door. A person barely fits there. The child's face is red from the fever. He's sick. They put him to sleep next to the toilet. By comparison, when children get sick, everyone in the house tries to make it easier for them. They bring soup, let them sleep nearby, cuddle up, because the child feels bad. But with Ruby, the child gets sent to the bathroom, and that's only the physical side. Psychologically, she was raising the children in just as distorted a system of coordinates. One of the comments, the poor girls had the idea of motherhood and homemaking as the main goal of life drilled into them from an early age. And another subscriber admitted that she hadn't commented anywhere in a long time, but here she couldn't resist. And in her own video, Ruby told her daughter she could become a teacher, a lawyer, anything, and the subscriber was glad. Then Ruby added, but most importantly, a good mother. The effect was immediately zeroed out. She could have just included that on the list: teacher, lawyer, engineer, and also a mom. They place motherhood above. But most likely the roots of this attitude are in Ruby's own biography. She got married at 18, had her first child at 21. She never had her own life, and for some reason she wanted exactly the same for her daughter. In one of the videos, she recounts a school episode and presents it as a story of her own strength. A woman from college admissions came to English class. Everyone went around naming ambitious goals: lawyer, doctor, and Ruby stood up and said she wanted to be a mother and homemaker, and the woman clarified, quote, 87, and Ruby answered, quote, 88. And after the lesson, the teacher gave her a dressing down: not ambitious, burying her talent, settling for less. She decided, quote, 89, how, quote, 90 becomes clear from another interview, where her self-awareness is completely absent. She tells frankly horrifying episodes as sweet family anecdotes, almost word for word. A year ago, her 6-year-old daughter was saying her evening prayer and said, underscore, quote, underscore 91, underscore, and Ruby found this endearing, laughed. No, a 6-year-old should be asking in a prayer for a doll or a bicycle, not for basic survival. By the way, about survival. The oldest son also prayed when he was taken at 14 to the Anasazi camp in the desert. He genuinely prayed to make it through. All of this had surfaced even before the bed story. Against this backdrop, fragments were pulled up to the surface again and started being discussed anew. The story of sending Chad to camp, into the wilderness, is its own saga. If you watch how Ruby and Kevin describe the Anasazi Foundation, you might really think that every teenager who's taken into the Arizona desert gets $1 million. That's how obsessive, almost pathological it is. They film everything: packing the things, redoing the room, missing him, going to pick him up, the meetup, non-stop. And video after video, it's one solid Anasazi, which in itself is strange because we're talking about a program for troubled teens. And such camps, in the opinion of psychologists, from the participants themselves who grew up, more often bring harm than good. And Kevin starts gently, quote, 92, and he answers himself, quote, 93. The logical question, what for? But Kevin immediately closes the topic. Ruby adds, and Kevin tells about snakes, bears, mountain lions, and he adds, quote, 97, quote, Ruby nods, quote, 98, quote, a strange parental fear. Kevin sums up, quote, 99, quote, and here is where Ruby's main trait emerges. She's a master of conversation. She arranges words so that from the outside it seems a brilliant thought. Beautifully spoken, right? But let's look further. When Chad comes back, Ruby essentially makes Anasazi the only topic he's allowed to talk about. She forces him over and over to retell the experience, and from him you can't see any excitement at all. Even if he really did grow there, the very fact that your parents sent you to survive on your own for months, that's early. In his place, many would have felt simply abandoned. Plus, they paid more than $10,000, and by some estimates around $15, and in some cases such programs run up to $40. Some parents take out loans to send their children to such camps, and in the end, they get a child with even greater baggage of resentments. And here a simple thought suggests itself. Well, maybe try first normally. put vegetables on the table, talk to your own child like a human being. And after the return, Ruby films a video in which she throws a surprise, makes the room cozy. In reality, she plasters it top to bottom with Anasazi paraphernalia, and it looks like a souvenir shop at the camp. And in the comments people write, "This is troubling, considering that for Chad, the experience could have been traumatic. He probably dreamed of returning to a normal bed, and instead his room has been turned into a mini Anasazi. This is more like control and brainwashing than care." And users also noted that during the grueling wilderness program, he gained almost 5 kilograms. He himself will recount that he came back literally without clothes. ___quote_101___. Those are his exact words. And since then, a ton of unpublished footage has leaked online, and in it, there are truly chilling things. In one video, Ruby sits by the bed with the aura of a caregiver to whom you would never entrust your children. With a complete absence of empathy, she reasons about planning, picks up a jar of marbles, and there are 100 marbles in this jar, and suddenly from downstairs she yells, ___quote_102___. And Ruby turns off the camera, comes back, turns it on again, and is already smiling. ___quote_103___. And in another video clearly planned for clipping, she's telling something in the kitchen. And suddenly she flips a switch. "Stop. What is that face? Sorry, I got nervous." And, "Ruby, don't look at me. It's weird. Be yourself." "I am being myself." Then change. Be yourself. "I am being myself." Then change. That's how it sounds. And in another fragment, she's trying to seat the children on the couch for a joint video. She snaps at her husband. "Put her on the damn couch already." And this has gone on for years without stopping. Ruby is putting up the Christmas tree. Chad is helping. He looks completely miserable. She doesn't try to lighten the mood, doesn't try to joke or hug him. She just explodes. "Chad, I'm asking you to give me one evening that would be pleasant to spend with you. Take that look off your face and be happy that you're with us." "But I can't." "Well, fine then." The cameras turn off mid-sentence, and Chad would later say, "She cuts those frames out. She could have lashed me, gotten a belt, pulled down my pants, and beaten me." Those are exact words, said after everything came out. And another recording of what wasn't shown. Chad is very little sitting on the couch. Ruby plops down next to him. __quote_115__. He nods. She won't let up. He knows. Tell us who. And on the recording remained one of those conversations. Outwardly, nothing terrifying, but hard to watch. Grandpa's name. Ruby nods and within a second asks the same thing again, as if hearing it for the first time. The boy gets confused. He's already answered it so many times. He mutters that he got confused, repeats __119_, and Ruby winces, __120_. The tone is as if the child is annoying her. She adds, __121_, __122, and then a pause. And from the next room, short, __123. That's Kevin. "Go out and close the door." Ruby looks at the children with such disdain and contempt that you feel uncomfortable. She turns to Chad. "If I allow you to do the vlog and I spend time on this, you're required to help." And she demands that he joyfully tell the story of his name. And Chad, "Honestly, I don't know why, I just can't right now." He says he's happy and walks away. And in another segment, she's filming the children in Easter outfits, and someone tries to get a word in. Ruby snaps instantly. "You don't have the right to talk while I'm recording. Sit, be quiet, quickly downstairs." A flat, dry, commanding tone. Not a drop of warmth. These are her own children. Now the heaviest scene. At the dinner table. Kevin is holding the camera. Ruby is showing off a new ring. The 4-year-old daughter tries to climb onto the table, maybe reaching for food, maybe just wanting attention. Ruby abruptly extends her hand. With one palm, she grabs her daughter by the neck from behind. With the other, she covers her mouth and at the same time her nose, because the child is small. With force, she drags the little one off the table and says, "We'll cut this out. Get down and be quiet. It's not your turn." And Kevin calmly shows 2 fingers in a scissors gesture. Just an editing note. Under this clip, there's a comment. __quote _129 ___. And while one piece of footage after another comes out, Chad recalls details. During that period, the parents hired an expensive lawyer and a PR specialist. Both proposed the simplest way out: publicly apologize. Ruby's reaction, according to Kevin, was brief. "Over my dead body." And she'd show the world real parenting. And here, Ruby finally goes off the rails. The logic now is this: you think I'm bad? Now I'll show you how bad. The parenting style mutates rapidly. Before, in the comments, people would joke, __quote _131 ___. Now you want to call in special forces. Religion turns into something that doesn't look like faith. This is no longer the church, a personal interpretation. Ruby had long rolled into pure extremism. The same lexicon, the same shell, an instrument of power. She hides behind God to impose her will, and the vlogs are now all about God. Chaos in the house, a signal to return to the home base. The home base, according to her, is, "I am a child of God, I am at the center." She adds prayers to get through the day, says she's working as hard as she can, announces she's leading a parenting course again. In one of the episodes, a phrase is uttered that makes you cringe. "Your awakened child is a zombie." This basically is where we see her. Ruby recounts that in the middle school her daughter attends, the teachers came up with a flash mob. The whole class learns a TikTok dance to a popular track. Ruby was alarmed. Her daughter names the song. She opens the lyrics. The conclusion is brief: disgusting, all promiscuous and perverse. Thinks about the children. The teacher, says Ruby, wants to be trendy and liked by 12-year-olds, so she's driving to the school without an appointment, sits in the reception, and will sit there until they see her. She spoke to the vice principal. They promised to call her in to see the principal the next day. And in the next video, she flies out of the school, literally choking on tears. She gets into the car and sobs. __quote _134 __, and recounts the conversation. __quote _135 __, every track she personally approved, the principal, including this one with such lyrics. __quote _136 __, she said. This song was recently played in an ad for a major grocery chain, and viewers quickly figured out what made Ruby sob: Flo Rida's "Low," that very verse about apple-bottom jeans. And in the supermarket ad, they looped a short "low, low, low" about discounts. And she was going to use it for dances. And if you remember what a 12-year-old child went through in this house, hunger, no bed, arguments about low look like pure absurdity. But Ruby decides, this is the very hill she'll die on. And through tears, she relays the principal's words, "But this is your personal idea of morality." Ruby won't let up. She tells the principal that morality is determined only by what is pleasing to God, and the opinion of other parents doesn't interest her. But Ruby just cares harder. You're engaged in a substitution. You take an amoral song and convince yourself everything is okay. The administration offers a compromise to excuse her daughter from this number, and Ruby rejects this immediately. She didn't come for anything convenient, including not for her daughter. The daughter will be transferred to another class, but not because the school decided so, but because she decided so. And she adds, quote, 143. Here Ruby starts sobbing, large tears, throws out, quote, 144. The principal calmly replies, quote, 145, quote, 146, quote, said Ruby, quote, 147, quote, next, a separate video. Ruby herself anticipates the reaction, quote, 148, quote, the younger ones were told plainly, quote, _149. That is, she says directly on camera, her goal is to traumatize her own children. In the same video, another story. She left the youngest at home. didn't let them go to school. Kevin, by all appearances, shares this logic. In the same video, he muses, "He used to love Christmas movies that gave you a warm feeling, but now he watches them and thinks, 'What filth?' And in the finale, every child gets what they wanted. Society swallowed this whole. Love is consumption. It's bigger boxes, brighter bows. But these are completely different things." Quote underscore 150 underscore. Why single out specifically the two youngest, the ones who at their age take Christmas the most seriously? No one asked for a Lamborghini. A small educational toy on Christmas morning would have been gesture enough, but no. The story with the gifts was finished by a neighbor. Ruby continues to publicly share wild things. In one of the videos, she muses that small children are sexual beings. A child cleans the room, arranges the toys, steps back, looks and feels good. An act of sexuality. And under the video, someone in the comments dryly notes, "Actually, this is called cleaning, just so you know." And in my opinion, this alone is more than enough to bring in CPS. But when the neighbors did contact CPS, the worker asked one thing: "Have you seen marks on the children?" No. And they were told, without injuries, without evidence, we can't intervene. Later, this woman would say that she regrets one thing, that she didn't lie, that she didn't say yes because perhaps that's exactly what could have stopped this, and what will happen to Ruby's children and to her new partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. That's already a completely different chapter. And you know what I want to say at the end? It's very easy to be horrified, close the tab and live on like, this is somewhere over there, those are cultists. I would never. But the value of these stories isn't to scare or to judge. If neighbors feel something, you have to speak up. If a child next to you grows sadder when their mother is mentioned, you have to notice. And if something seems strange, it isn't always not my business. Sometimes it's the only chance no one else will hear. Also, children aren't a project for adult ambitions. They're alive, they feel love. It isn't measured by the pain we're willing to inflict for their own good. Love is when the child next to you breathes easier, not more fearfully. That's the whole criterion. What do you think about this video? Write in the comments. See you next time. In Bobenhausen, a village of 500 souls about 50 kilometers north of Frankfurt, an 18-year-old birthday girl gets on a yellow bicycle and rides off, and never comes back. What follows will be months of searching, years of questions, and nearly 2 decades without answers. And at the center of it all will be a person whom everyone here knew by name. Perhaps we should start from the beginning. Wetterau. Tall trees, wide meadows, the Leisbach stream. It winds through the area for 18 kilometers. A small bridge crosses through the village, and beside it stands a sign. Caution, slippery when wet. Thick bushes all around. Shade, silence. These are exactly the kinds of places that seem protected from anything bad by their very nature. The Banasaks moved here about 10 years ago from Frankfurt. Father Richard, Mother Gabriele. 3 daughters, one already in university, the second attending the same elementary school in Ronstadt as Johanna, the youngest. Blue eyes, blonde hair, sometimes loose, sometimes in a ponytail, bangs across her forehead. A smile that makes you want to smile back. The village has a sports field, shaded by trees, 500 meters from the center, right at the edge of the woods. Johanna often went there with her friends. She also loved riding her yellow bicycle. In villages like this, that's just the way things are. You head out, you come back, and nobody worries much. Everyone who knew Johanna said the same thing. She always came back on time. If she said she'd be there at 5:30, then she would. Cheerful overall, one of their own. And on August 17, 1999, this day is special for Johanna. She turns 8 years old. A morning of congratulations, a celebration cake, presents. One day when you're a little princess, this day will be the last when she is seen alive. She was alone on her bicycle. Her friends had gone home earlier, at the end of the summer day. Around 5 in the evening, Johanna also headed back. Along the way, she stopped at a bench next to the bridge over the Leisbach. A quiet spot, A paved path, bushes and trees on both sides, the babbling of the stream, birds in the branches, nothing alarming, nothing that would have raised concern. That same evening, a soccer match was being played at the sports field in Bobenhausen. The local team kicked off at 8, and while the ball was being chased around the field, in the Banasak family that feeling you can't put into words was growing. It was already well past 7, and Johanna still hadn't appeared. She had promised to be back by 7, but she hadn't come, and her father immediately started searching. He probably wanted to believe she had simply gotten caught up in playing and forgotten about the time, that she was about to appear any moment from around the bend. But she was nowhere to be found, and the anxiety only grew with every minute. Instead of Johanna herself, they came across something else. On the bike path by the sports field, by that very bench next to the Leisbach, stood her yellow bicycle, just standing there, not locked to anything. And the father understood immediately. Johanna would never have left her bicycle like that. He called the police and reported the disappearance of his 8-year-old daughter. The soccer match ended, the excitement of the game dissolved, and in its place came a crushing tension when the police arrived at the field with news of the disappearance. For a small village, this is something unthinkable. The news instantly spread among everyone who was there. Soon, firefighters arrived, search groups were formed, canine units with dogs were brought in. Everyone wanted to find her as quickly as possible. It proved to be no easy task. The territory was vast. The assumption was that she may have gotten into some kind of trouble and needed help. Maybe she was lost, maybe scared. Every minute counted. At 9:30, darkness fell over the area. Eyes were closing, legs refused to move, but the anxiety hadn't gone anywhere. People didn't disperse. The dogs could no longer pick up a trail. At that point, the search was suspended. Every day in the country, between 200 and 300 people go missing. Most are found fairly quickly. In 98% of cases, disappearances can be cleared up in a short time. Back then, it was being perceived in exactly that way. Just a missing birthday girl who would be found the next morning, and the search resumes. Fields, tree lines, and yards. Neighbors, family acquaintances, and volunteer firefighters from nearby villages join them. Everyone has the same goal: find Johanna and bring her home. Official police representatives comment on what is happening. There is so far no data confirming a violent crime. Besides the investigators and search teams, dozens of journalists begin to descend on the small Bobenhausen. Regional and national publications are eager to cover the story of the missing 8-year-old. Reporters seek out relatives, neighbors, acquaintances of the Banasak family. Some go even further, presenting themselves as police officers in order to get into the house and obtain photographs or any kind of answers. The parents fairly quickly realize they are being misled. Apparently, they recognize that the people standing before them are not real officers, but people with cameras and tape recorders. At that moment, they are ready to cling to any opportunity, to the slightest chance of getting their daughter back even a little sooner. One of the parents says out loud what holds them both together. "Until I'm shown a discovery, I consider my daughter alive. Otherwise, this is simply impossible to endure." The police release a photograph of the girl in hopes of getting new information. Someone must have seen her. In the picture, the birthday girl stands next to her beloved yellow bicycle. She's wearing a light white t-shirt, loose blue jeans, and blue rubber boots. To her left is a bright rectangular school backpack, of which there were many at the time, blue, yellow, red, with a cartoon design. Not far from Bobenhausen is a flooded quarry. If she had wandered there, the outcome could have been tragic. A diver goes underwater to check. Visibility is practically zero. The water is murky, dirty. Again and again his hands run into large branches, each time a second of fear, and the unspoken question to which no one wants an answer. By midday, the search of the quarry is called off without results. The inspection of sewage lines and abandoned buildings also yields nothing. A reward is announced, 10,000 marks for information that helps the investigation. But the anxiety doesn't subside, it only grows. A week passes, and the 8-year-old birthday girl is still listed as missing. The mother tells journalists they are certain their daughter has been abducted, and that those holding her intend to use her for some horrific purpose. It's unbearable to think about, but the parents try to find anything they can. They convince themselves the abductors need money, and that if they pay, their daughter will be returned. They are ready to buy her back. They no longer care as long as she's found, but no one responds. Whoever has Johanna either doesn't hear them or isn't interested in money, and the police also stop relying on a simple public appeal. Shortly after the disappearance, a special unit is formed, and up until that point, the investigation had been working on several fronts at once. Various theories were considered. The suspect could be anyone, from a random person with no connection to Bobenhausen to someone in the family's immediate circle. Even Johanna's own relatives were initially not excluded from the circle of suspects. Investigators did not rule out the theory of an accident that loved ones may have tried to conceal. However, the parents and other family members were cleared of suspicion quickly. That was the first reason to breathe a sigh of relief, and so the investigation moved on to interviews. The time shortly before the disappearance, as well as with their parents. Several random passers-by who had been walking nearby that day came forward to the police themselves. They had seen her at the sports field. She was fine then. A particularly important place among the witnesses was occupied by a man named Manfred. On the day of the disappearance, he was driving toward Bobenhausen. He was rushing to a sporting event. Some car in front of him was doing 30 to 40 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone. For someone in a hurry, this is a real test. At the first opportunity, Manfred passed the slow driver and shot him a less than friendly look. Behind the wheel sat an unshaven man in glasses with a ponytail at the back of his head. The car itself was a brown, low-slung Volkswagen with a license plate from the HG series, the license plate of the Hochtaunus district. He didn't attach particular significance to this. People drive slowly sometimes, it happens. He drove home quickly, grabbed his bag, and headed to the soccer game. And there in the parking lot by the sports field, the same car again. Around 5:23 p.m., it was parked near the bike path, exactly where Johanna's bicycle would later be found. The fortunate thing was that Manfred worked as an auto mechanic and knew cars much better than the average person. That's exactly what allowed him to give such a detailed description. Based on his statement, the police began searching for the mysterious owner of the vehicle. Who was this unshaven man with the ponytail? The search dragged on, and every car had to be checked. There was almost no progress. Several years later, a composite sketch of the wanted man was produced. However, it came out only in profile. The question of the perpetrator remains open. Despite Richard, Johanna's father, having been officially cleared as a suspect, whispers began in the village. The thing was, the man behind the wheel had a ponytail, exactly like Richard's. Such a hairstyle was rare among local men, and this coincidence immediately provided fuel for gossip. It's hard to even imagine what it was like for him in those days. A father who dreams of only one thing, to hold his daughter again, and at the same time hears speculations and suspicions behind his back. At one point, the investigation led to Friedrichsdorf, near Frankfurt. There they found a Volkswagen Jetta that at first glance matched the description. The owner was a certain Rick E. The car generally fit the picture, but not in every respect. Upon a more detailed examination, doubts arose for the investigators. The color of the car didn't match what Manfred had described. Whether this was that particular car remained to be determined. Later in the case files, there would appear an interview record of Manfred, the man who saw the car on September 2nd. It was on him that investigators were placing special hopes. 18 days after Johanna's disappearance, the operational group, together with Manfred, heads to Friedrichsdorf. The calculation is simple. He is the only one who saw that car. Rick is a lead they can already work with. While some officers work with Manfred, two others simultaneously speak with Rick himself, finding out where he was on September 2nd. Rick tells his story, and his account destroys the theory. He couldn't have been in Bobenhausen. According to him, in the afternoon of that day, he was in a minor traffic incident. Everything was settled on the spot, and in the evening, a girlfriend came to visit him. She confirms it. Manfred also doesn't give the investigators anything. Rick's car is blue. The one he saw back then was brown. So these are different cars, and there are no more leads. The search continues, and the parents put up thousands of flyers across the entire district. They have no intention of stopping. By that point, the operational group had checked about 2,000 leads. The investigators turned to television, to the show Unsolved Cases. The hope is that one of the viewers will turn out to be a chance witness and be able to share the necessary detail. By this time, the criminal police are already leaning toward the conclusion that this is a crime, not an accident. But the television appeal yields nothing either. About 30 calls come in. None of them turns out to be decisive. Psychics name places where Johanna supposedly is, offer help. And at one point, the situation reaches the height of cynicism. One of the teachers brings an entire class to the family's house, as if on a field trip, as if they're looking at a tourist attraction. Johanna's mother, Gabriele, drives them off the property. 8 weeks have passed. These are weeks of waiting and hope that lead nowhere. The closest person is missing everywhere, in every little thing, in every ordinary day. But it isn't grief yet, because you can only truly grieve when you know for certain. And they still have no clarity. And more than half a year passes, Johanna's bed's still empty. The family doesn't give up, and they continue. They want answers, and the day comes that will bring certainty, that will change everything. April 1st, 2001. A man is walking in the woods near Alsfeld. This is not far from the Frankfurt-Kassel highway, about 100 kilometers from Bobenhausen, near the Burfa roadside rest area. He simply went out to get some air, stretch his legs. An ordinary walk, but something at the edge of the path stops his gaze and shatters all the peace of the place. There lies something, or rather someone, and those were remains. A small skull, 4 teeth, a fragment of the lower jaw, and scattered bone fragments. The arriving police carefully comb the discovery site. They hope that here they will be able to find traces that will finally point to the perpetrator and give answers to questions. Within a 500-meter radius, about 100 police officers make their way through the dense undergrowth. They are searching for what is left of the little birthday girl. A few more fragments, and apparently forest animals had scattered the remains. And here something is discovered that defies explanation. Around a found tuft of hair, adhesive tape is still wound. In total, investigators collect about 15 meters of tape of 2 different kinds, brown packing tape and silver duct tape. What did the final minutes look like? What role did that tape play? Fragments of rope are also found. K9 units lead the investigators to remnants of clothing, a little more than half of the jeans and a substantial piece of a t-shirt with Mickey Mouse on it. On April 1st, the police dial the Banasak family's number. They have to inform them that the worst fears may have been confirmed. Later, Johanna's mother, Gabriele, will admit that in that moment she briefly thought, what if this is an April Fool's joke? That same evening, the criminal police come to the family. The special investigative team for this case brings photographs of the found pieces of clothing. Later, he would say that in 30 years in the Criminal Investigation Department, that day became one of the hardest in his life. The parents look at the photos and recognize them immediately. These aren't just some pants and a shirt. These are their Johanna's clothes. The mother will say later that for 7 months they lived in constant tension, swinging between despair and hope, but they never allowed themselves to give up. By that point, the investigators no longer had any doubts. On September 2, 1999, Johanna had been abducted, and what was found in the forest is the final point of the case. This place, in their conviction, is not the scene of the crime. She was simply brought there and left. Father Richard barely speaks. Under his eyes there is deep exhaustion and grief. He lights one cigarette after another and says only one thing. __, quote _1 __. Now the parents have official confirmation. The DNA test leaves no doubts. Gabriele says that hope has simply vanished. Now she knows where her daughter is. But returning her is no longer possible. For 7 months there had remained at least some chance. Now there is none. For the residents of the small village, everything that happened doesn't fit in their heads. They had all been so close. Whatever had happened, it had happened right nearby. Gabriele stands in a black pantsuit. A wide-brimmed dark hat casts a shadow over her face. She is looking down. Beside her, also in black, stands her husband, wiping tears from his cheek. No parents in the world should have to go through this. But the questions remained unanswered. Why did he do it? Why did he just leave her in the forest? Not bury her? Not try to hide the traces? Did he not have enough time? Was he afraid of being caught? Or did he simply not care? On the timeline, everything fit, except for one detail. The tape had lain in the forest for several months, and yet an impression still remained on it. Evidence from the forest is handed over. The investigators are placing particular hopes on the tape. The forensic experts face no easy task: to unwind 15 meters of crumpled, stuck-together tape and lift every possible fiber and trace from every centimeter. One of the specialists decides to start with the shortest fragment in order to get at least some result as quickly as possible. She carefully unrolls a section of tape, and here is the first finding. A fragment of a fingerprint is visible. The question is whether it can lead the investigation to the one who did this. And the problem is that the tape had lain in the forest for several months, and nature had done its work, and the quality of the print leaves much to be desired. However, in addition to that, fibers are discovered under the microscope. They may have gotten there from a carpet, for example, from the floor covering in a car's trunk, and among them acrylic fibers are identified. The material was widely used in the 90s. From it, they sewed fluffy sweaters, knitted gloves, and upholstered car seats. The evidence has been collected, but there is nothing yet to compare it to. There are no suspects, not even an approximate circle of persons. Just a handful of fibers, yes, half a print. The investigation puts together a psychological profile of the possible perpetrator. A man, presumably between 20 and 40 years old, with an interest in binding practices, most likely living nearby. And so, 2.5 years after Johanna's disappearance, a line forms at the community hall in Bobenhausen. Local residents and visitors from surrounding villages, all roughly the age that matches the profile, they voluntarily submit fingerprints. In this way, more than 800 people are checked, and most of them come of their own free will, out of sympathy for the family and a desire to help the investigation. Johanna's father says that for many it was self-evident. Others explain their participation by saying they want the crime to be solved. Some come for the sake of their own loved ones, just so a dangerous person ends up behind bars. Over the village at that time, apparently, a heavy tension hung. People looked at each other with suspicion. Parents worried about their own children. At some point, Johanna's family can't bear it any longer and leaves the village. They never truly became their own here. And the thought that someone local may be behind all this gives the father no peace. He returns to it again and again, but as it will later turn out, Johanna will not be the only one. The nightmare repeats. Julia also has blonde hair, and she is also 8 years old. When she vanishes without a trace, on June 29th of the first year, on that Friday she is calmly playing on a playground, and then she disappears right from her native Biebertal Rodheim. Several days later, about 45 kilometers from the place of her disappearance, a report comes in of a discovery. What was found had been burned. The face is almost unrecognizable, but the DNA analysis leaves no doubts. It is Julia. As the investigation will later establish, the outcome came that very evening when she went missing. Johanna's mother could not tear herself away from one thought: the perpetrator is nearby. A person who had grieved alongside them, participated in the searches, spoken words of sympathy. He was the very one who knew where not to look. A 50-kilometer radius, Bobenhausen, Biebertal, the place where Johanna was found, the place where Julia lost her life. All the points fit into one circle, and this could not be a coincidence. In Julia's case, the answer came sooner. Her killer turned out to be a neighbor. The 33-year-old Thorsten W., the one who was seen constantly, who worked as an administrative employee at the University of Gießen, who was married and was raising his own child, unremarkable, quiet, polite. In 2003, the court handed down a life sentence for what he did to Julia. The investigation at that time also checked whether there was a connection between the two cases. The girls were the same age, looked similar, but that's where the similarities ended. No evidence, no overlaps. Whoever was behind Johanna's disappearance, it was a different person, and he was still at large. Gabriele did not give up. 3 years after her daughter was found, she once again appealed to the public. In a letter that many publications later quoted, she wrote __quote_2__. And in the same letter, words that cannot be read without heaviness. Why? Why our child specifically? It always seems that this happens to someone else, that it never happens to you. You just want a normal life for yourself, for your family, for those you love. In 2006, the police created a special working group, calling it Jaguar, and the goal was one: to find the driver of that car. Co-owners of vehicles received an invitation and were to submit fingerprints voluntarily. The question that hung in the air at the time was whether the perpetrator would actually come to such a procedure. Among others, Rick E. was on the list, the very one who had once been excluded from suspicion. Because of the color of his car, his vehicle was blue, not brown. This time he was not invited again. His fingerprints were already in the database from other cases. But here was the problem. Over the years, technology had moved forward. The LifeScan method had appeared. Rick had not gone through it, and what the investigation had at its disposal were only the old ink fingerprints. The forensic experts considered them suitable for comparison. They ran it. The comparison did not match. Rick was excluded again. And so, in 2009, at the entrance to Bobenhausen, the police put up a huge banner. On it was a photograph of Johanna. By that time, Richard was already gravely ill, a heart attack, a chronic lung disease. He had taken early retirement and rarely left his top-floor apartment. All the specialists agreed on one thing: the one who did this to Johanna had to be from her surroundings. Richard didn't just want, he needed to learn the name while he still had time, and the worst would be to learn that this someone was an acquaintance, someone he met in the entryway, whom he greeted when they met, with whom he might have sat at the same table. He said he needed clarity, while it was still possible to have it all. Years passed, the version had been worked through, the investigation had grown cold, but the parents did not give up. And then, in 2016, Richard was gone. He was only 64 years old. Until the very end, he didn't let go. He put up flyers, hung posters, kept on hoping. And then everything changed. 3 young investigators decided to take up the case anew, to review every piece of evidence, every trace, as if seeing them for the first time. The beginning turned out to be exhausting and bureaucratically cumbersome. Mountains of paperwork, folders of archival documents. Before getting to the real work, everything needed to be converted to digital format, and every sheet by hand through a scanner. The digitization alone took 10 to 12 weeks, and only after that could the investigation move forward. And there, too, was Rick, the same one with the blue Jetta. Back then, he had come into view as having a prior conviction for a sexual offense, and now he gradually moved back to the center of the investigation. Previously, he had been excluded from the circle of suspects. The fingerprinting seemed to give no grounds. Wasn't this just another waste of time? But no other name came up as often as his, not far from the place where Johanna had once disappeared. Several people were walking in the fresh air next to a cornfield. From the thicket came strange sounds. Something was moving inside. People came over to look and saw something that made them act immediately. On the ground lay a 14-year-old girl. Next to her was a man, naked. She too was almost undressed, and her hands were bound with tape. Exactly the same way as Johanna's. The witnesses reported what had happened to the police, and a case was opened. On February 15, 2017, investigators once again came to Friedrichsdorf, this time with a search warrant for Rick's apartment. What they saw there left them stunned. One of the officers later described how filthy it was. It was hard to believe anyone even lived there. Only a narrow, trodden path led to the bed. The mattress was dirty, torn, ropes and cords everywhere. By the bed, they found the remains of amphetamines. The investigators seized the phone and other data carriers, and in the attic they discovered something else. A small blue box, and inside it old clothes, ropes, cords, and tape. And later in the case file, an entry would appear that would set everything in motion. Surveillance for months, every step recorded, every contact, every route. Without ironclad evidence, such a man cannot be convicted. Everyone working on this case understood that. As one of the researchers would later describe, they tried to study him entirely, from birth to the present day. They turned over every grain in search of a lead. The life path was put together in detail and thoroughly. And here is what matters. Nothing that would explain how he grew into a person capable of such a thing could be found. The early conditions seemed to be quite normal. And yet, a criminal conviction. At 17, he attacked a little girl. 8 years old, long blonde hair, right on a rural road. She was saved only by 2 random cyclists. In another episode, Rick was charged with an attack on an 11-year-old. While the police continued surveillance, more came to light. What should not be? Pages of materials of sexual violence against the youngest. On his data carriers, photographs were found of blonde girls, 8 years old. He had taken them secretly, just as they were walking home to school. And again, time after time, he searched the internet for information about the outcome of the Johanna Banasak case. They watched him everywhere, at the swimming pool, at night, in the fields, when he was stealing potatoes. For almost half a year, like a shadow. And so, years after what had happened, the breakthrough, the moment everyone had been waiting for so long. In the laboratory, fibers from the adhesive tape recovered when Johanna was found were compared with samples of tape from the blue box and a match. After all this time, a match. But the fibers alone were not enough. The actual object from which they had come was needed. In parallel, they returned to the old partial fingerprint. And here too, clarity soon arrived. The print belonged to Rick, the left thumb. Finally, everything came together. The day they had waited for so long arrives. October 25th, 2017. The weather outside is cool and dry. At 7:20 in the morning, 2 investigators stand at his door. They are ready for the arrest and for searching the apartment. And here he comes out to them, an unremarkable, short man. Later, the investigator would say, had she met him on the street, she would never have thought that this very person was capable of such a thing. Anxiety could be sensed in him, but he looks calm. He asks permission to read the search warrant, paper in one hand, cigarette in the other. He sits on the edge of the bed and reads, and then utters a phrase, an obvious attempt to somehow wiggle out of it. This must be something fabricated. The investigators make it clear that this is not about a fabrication. It's about the death of a real little Johanna. And Rick replies, "Where did you get that from?" Total nonsense. I've done all sorts of things in my life, but not this. He packs several thick fantasy books into a bag, takes his cigarettes. It's time to head to the station. The investigators put handcuffs on him, a safety belt, and ankle shackles. During the 45-minute ride to the investigative department, Rick sits across from 2 detectives and asks the same question over and over. How did they get to him at all? He had already been checked back in the day. They had found nothing. They had let him go. Nothing had been charged, but technology doesn't stand still. So the interrogation began. The investigators laid out the situation without mincing words. "Sir, the question isn't whether you did it. We are certain you are that person, and the only thing that interests us is how and why. And right now you have the chance to tell us about it yourself." He was silent, then said, "I need to think." He turned away, covered his face with his palm, rolled his eyes, and from time to time he smoked. Meanwhile, the search of his apartment was going on. The dwelling was still in monstrous condition. 38 square meters, garbage wherever you looked. Moldy food, dead flies on the floor, a smell, a mixture of rot, stagnant air, cigarette smoke, and sweat. The front door from the inside was hastily covered with tape. Among the findings were 7,500 euros in cash and several letters, and also strange literature. The girl hunter, the child collector, Stories about the abducted and the missing. Traces of one kind or another could be detected everywhere. The residents of the neighborhood were shocked. Rick seemed withdrawn, unsociable. He avoided people, but to think that he, of all people, someone who had periodically been seen by them, one would later say, "It simply doesn't fit in your head." He was normal. He said hello when you met him. Good morning, good afternoon. A person like that simply doesn't raise suspicion. So, who is he, this Rick? In March 1976, a little boy came into the world, and soon after his birth, his parents gave him up for adoption. They didn't want to or couldn't take on the responsibility, but Rick was never weighed down by this. He considered his parents to be the ones who chose him themselves, those who raised him. When Rick was about 5 or 6, the relationship between his adoptive parents began to fracture. They separated. He stayed with the mother, and he saw his father rarely, once every 2 years, a couple of weeks during vacation. In school, he studied, and in the end, he received his diploma with a decent grade, a 2.2. At 17, his grandmother rented him a one-room apartment in the Hochtaunus district in Friedrichsdorf. Rick served 3 months in the Army, then 10 months of alternative service. After that, he enrolled at the university in biochemistry, but he didn't finish the course. He dropped out. In the second year, his mother died. With the law, Rick had a troubled relationship. Convictions for traffic violations, for violations of drug-related laws, for burglary. He had even been behind bars. By that time, he was already over 40, usually with hair tied back in a ponytail. Unemployed, he lived on money that his father wired him and on what remained as an inheritance from his mother. The apartment was neglected. He rarely came out of it. No girlfriend, no close relations, and now this man returns to the interrogation room. The first thing he says sends a chill down your spine. Parents have the right to know what happened to their child. They are right, and yes, I bear responsibility for this. On the timeline, everything fit, except for one detail. He himself says it was an accident. Rick tells about September 2nd, 1999. He was a little over 20 at the time. As the investigation would later establish, that day he had consumed illegal substances. He was driving around the streets in his Volkswagen Jetta and looking for someone. And then he saw Johanna. She was playing by the bridge, and according to him, she caught his eye immediately. He attacked her and immobilized her with chloroform. Then he shoved her into the trunk. The abduction, as he claims. But he understood he had to hurry. The soccer match would be starting soon. At any moment, someone could spot him. 3 times he had to stop. Johanna was coming too, screaming and kicking the tires from the inside. At a horse paddock, he stopped to steal a rope to restrain her. Another 6 kilometers later, at a gas station, he bought adhesive tape. He bound her, when shortly after that she once again started kicking the tires. A desperate attempt to save herself, he opened the trunk, and at that moment she lunged toward him, to calm her down, as he says. He struck her, and apparently her nose was broken, and since her mouth was covered with tape, she could no longer breathe, and she suffocated. And when he opened the trunk the next time, she was no longer moving. Things didn't go the way he had planned. Yes, he had intended to assault her. He had abducted her, but he hadn't intended to cause irreparable harm. It was an accident. Rick says all this evenly, coldly, without the slightest hint of emotion. One gets the impression that he is almost reveling in the interrogation and the attention to his person. He dictates the statements, corrects spelling errors, inserts clarifications with asterisks. If a wording doesn't suit him, he reformulates it. The investigator who conducted the interrogation would later say that he behaved almost like a German teacher. In the end, he put his signature under the statements. Other pieces of physical evidence are photographed. The investigators discovered notes from which a certain inclination becomes evident. These had manifested in him already in his school years. They seized hard drives and data carriers. In total, about 7 terabytes of data, approximately 17 million files. 10 police officers would spend half a year going through it. In the content of the video recordings, the recurring theme is power, humiliation, more than 20 years. Again and again, recordings involving minors. Looking at all this was unbearably difficult for the officers. In the attic, they found 2 plush, dark gray covers for the driver's and passenger's seats, as well as 2 covers from the rear seats. The fibers on them matched the fibers of the adhesive tape. All doubts were removed. Johanna had been transported in the trunk of his Jetta, and here the investigation asked itself a question: was this an accident? The investigators tried to recreate the events. Could his statements correspond to reality? A pediatrician determined that suffocating in a closed space takes 2 hours, precisely the amount of time, according to Rick, that it all lasted. Physically impossible. The investigators also tried to recreate how he had wound meters of tape around her head, supposedly without covering her nose. It turned out that this too was unreal. He had wound the tape around her face 20 times. The story falls apart completely. His statements fell apart immediately. Rick claimed he specifically went to another store for tape, but according to the timeline he himself had given, this was physically impossible. The horse paddock he had mentioned, apparently, had been made up. 18 years later, it became possible to prove that Rick was not just guilty, but also a liar. And at that very same time, in the mid and late 90s, similar stories were happening in the same region. The investigators asked themselves whether the same person might be behind them. Melanie Frank was 13 when on June 16, 1999, she vanished without a trace. The blonde girl went out to buy her mother cigarettes from a vending machine and didn't come home. In 2008, only her remains were found in the woods. This case still remains unsolved. There was also Annika from Hofheim. For her 11th birthday, she received a dog, and on September 10, 1996, she set off to the store to buy something, and never made it there. She has not been found to this day. 2 missing girls, around the same time as Johanna. Could this have been Rick? In his apartment, they found children's clothing. In the Gießen detention center, he was questioned about both cases, but sufficient grounds for an indictment could not be found at the time. And Johanna's case finally reached court, nearly 20 years later. By that point, she would have been about 27, of the regional court, short in glasses, ponytail, handcuffs. Johanna's mother was already in the courtroom, hands folded on her lap. This was the first encounter with the person who had taken her daughter from her. Rick kept his head lowered the entire time. No remorse, no shame, not once did he raise his eyes. The mother delivered a speech, speaking about the senseless outcome and about how the guilty party should spend the rest of his life behind bars. And during the session, the cyclist eyewitness was mentioned. And the last word was taken by Rick himself. In 2018, the verdict was handed down. Rick was found guilty of committing a crime with particular cruelty, as well as of possession of prohibited materials. It was not an accident. The 8-year-old birthday girl, the very one referenced in the title of this video, lost her life because of the tape with which he had wrapped her head. About 29 layers. Life imprisonment. For Johanna's mother, this verdict brought at least some relief, but she said, "This is still a wound that will never close. I lost my close one." In the institution where Rick was sent, things did not go easy for him. One of his cellmates, himself a father serving a sentence for robbery, gave the guilty man a taste of what payback feels like. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, write in the comments what you think about this video. See you next time.